Now, hello, you're all very welcome to our Fulbright webinar today. I'd like to welcome our panel of speakers as well as all our participants who are just joining us as I speak. We're delighted that so many people have registered for the webinar today, and there's so much interest in Fulbright scholarships for health science and tech. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, all accomplished Fulbright alumni. We're going to hear from Alix Whelan.
Hello.
Alix is a PhD candidate in biomedical engineering at Trinity College, and she was a Fulbright Enterprise Ireland awardee to the University of Texas at Austin. Professor Colin Bradley.
Hi, how are you?
Is Professor of General Practice in the School of Medicine at UCC and was a Fulbright HRB Health Impact Scholar to the University of Oklahoma. Trina Ray.
Hi.
Is Course Director of TV and Media at IT Carlow and was a Fulbright Tech Impact Scholar to NYU. Dr. Cian O'Leary.
Hi everyone.
Is Pharmaceutics Lecturer and PI in the Tissue Engineering Research Group at RCSI, and he was a Fulbright National University of Ireland Scholar to the University of California, San Diego. And last but not least, we have Roshin Hyde, who, you want to say hello, Roshin?
Hi there.
Roshin is a doctoral research student at the School of Natural and Built Environment in Queen's University, Belfast, and she was a Fulbright EPA awardee to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. We're also joined on the call today by Fulbright Ireland USA Executive Director Dara Fitzgerald. Dara, if you want to say hello.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to have everybody on the call.
And our Executive Assistant, Sarah West.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks. So all of our alum speakers have had diverse experiences of their Fulbright scholarships in the US, and they'll be sharing their invaluable insights and tips with us today. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions, so you can type in the chat box at any time during the webinar, and then after the panelists have spoken, I'll put the questions to them, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can at the end of the session. If you have specific questions about application dates and eligibility criteria, etc., please do visit our website for the answers on those. All of that is readily available in our FAQs, and we will have a webinar that comprehensively runs through the application process on 17th of September, which you can register for, okay? And of course, our awards managers are always there to answer emails at awards@fulbright.ie. But today is an opportunity to hear straight from our alumni speakers who have experienced these awards firsthand, and to get their personal insights. So please direct questions today to them, so you can type them in the chat box. I won't be going through the full application process today by any means, but I'll just give you a very brief overview of what Fulbright award options are available to you before handing over to the speakers, okay? So just bear with me 2 seconds and I'll share my presentation here. Now, hopefully you can see my screen there. Yeah. So just to go through the application timeline very briefly, if you're applying for a Fulbright Award for 21-22, the application opens very shortly on the 31st of August, closes on the 2nd of November. Reviews will take place November to December 2020, and then interviews take place in the new year, January to February, and then offers are usually made in March. So in terms of planning your application, we recommend that you review the information on our website, choose your award, and I'm going to go through the award categories very briefly now. Find a course if you want to do an MA or a PhD, or plan your proposal if you want to do research or lecturing, and reach out to your host contacts in the US, so whatever organization you want to go to. Research what it means to be a Fulbrighter, so look into the Fulbright ethos. This is a really important part, and our alumni will touch on that today. And you can register your interest now on our website, and we'll contact you then. Oops. So in terms of the Irish award categories, there were 5 categories, and you'll be applying to one of these. So the Irish Student Awards are for postgraduate research or degree programs. The Scholar Awards then are for academic, professional research or lecturing. The Tech Impact Awards are for academic, professional research with a focus on ICT, tech, And the Irish FLTA Awards are to teach the Irish language and take courses, while the Fulbright Schumann Awards are run by the Belgian Fulbright Commission, but they are also open to Irish citizens. Today, I suppose the most relevant ones for this audience would be the Irish Student Awards, the Scholar Awards, and the Tech Impact Awards. So these are all open to all disciplines. So no matter what field you're coming from, whether you know, you're a student, scholar, professional, from any discipline, you can apply to these. We also have a number of sponsored awards available within this category. Okay, so a number of the speakers today actually went on sponsored awards to the US. So you're welcome to apply to the all discipline, but to bear in mind that there is a specific fund of money set aside for each of these sponsored awards. So it's a good idea to check out which ones might be relevant to you. There's also an opportunity to engage with sponsors before you leave and after you come back from the US. So it can be really beneficial to apply to a sponsored award. So for today's audience, for instance, the Fulbright EI Award, the EPA Award, GSI, Chagask, HRB Award, NUI, and the Tech Impact Awards might be of particular interest. So there's quite a lot of options there. Just in terms of finding a host, for most of our awards, you reach out to a host institution of your choice. So you can go wherever you want in the US. How to get started with this, research experts in your field, talk to your lecturers or your colleagues about places that might be of interest to go for you. Bear in mind we welcome diversity in terms of organizations and geography. Reach out to our Fulbright Irish US alum. Our speakers today will be talking about how they made their choice on a host institution. Feel free to use existing Fulbright links. We do have a number of sponsored awards with US institutions, even if they're not relevant to your area of research or study. You know, if you want to make contact with them, we can facilitate that. And of course, always reach out to your mentors and ask them for their advice. So in terms of next steps after this webinar, we encourage you to review eligibility criteria on Fulbright website, register your interest in the award category of your choice, watch our videos on YouTube, and sign up for our applications process webinar on the 17th of September. So that's enough for me. So I will just hand over now to our first speaker, which is Alix Whelan. Alix, if you want to, you have a few slides you want to share, don't you?
Yeah. You can see that now?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so thanks for that, Emma. So my name is Alix. I'm currently in the final year of my PhD in Trinity. And just about 2 years ago, I went to my Fulbright Award, which was the Fulbright Enterprise Ireland Award. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the research that I do first. So I work in cardiovascular devices, and more specifically the treatment of aortic valve stenosis. So the aortic valve is a really critical component of the cardiovascular system, and it controls the blood flow out of the heart with each cardiac cycle. And it achieves that through the opening and closing of these 3 leaflets, as you can see here. So with the onset of aortic valve stenosis, these leaflets become thickened and calcified, meaning they just can't open and close properly. So a popular treatment method for this is delivery of a bioprosthetic heart valve. So these devices typically consist of a metallic frame, and then there's 3 leaflets made from animal tissue attached to them, and they simulate and replicate the patient's native own disease leaflets. So these devices are long been known to have very inadequate durability. So the tissue fatigues over time and basically rendering them failed in patients. So this is kind of where my research comes in. So these tissue leaflets are made from pericardium, which is a sac of collagenous tissue around the heart. So my experimental component of my research is taking patches of these tissue and quantifying the collagen fiber orientation and alignment, as that's what dictates the mechanical properties of the tissue. Then I do various different mechanical testing to basically relate the structure and function of the tissue so we can improve the tissue mechanics in vivo. But really, there's only so far you can go with experimental work, because these devices are required to last up to 20 years, which is about 800 million cycles in vivo, because the leaflets open and close with every cardiac cycle. So that basically means you're not going to be doing a 20-year-long experiment, and this is where computational models come in. So the first portion of my research is extensive experimental work, but really to gather a database to make a really informed and accurate computational model. So in this field at the moment, there's no model that can accurately simulate the fatiguing of the tissue components, and that's really critical for increasing the durability for patient devices. So the first 2 years, as I said, were kind of spent doing experimental work. And then once I started to focus on the computational model aspect, this is where the Fulbright experience came in. So as I'm sure with every other field, there's a few very well-known and established researchers and leaders in the field. And for your areas of valves and specifically computational modeling, this would be Professor Michael Sachs in UT Austin. So my background meant that I didn't have a huge amount of computational experience. And then in terms of my research group, we do a lot of computational modeling, but not specifically in valves. So for me, this is really a perfect fit, because I would be able to learn their computational techniques, but then also bring it back to my research group. So I did both my undergrad and master's in Trinity. So I always really wanted to travel somewhere during my PhD, and this was a really good fit. So I went to UT Austin for about 6 or 7 months over to Michael Sachs's lab. So I just want to touch on a few different things to do with the Fulbright experience. So first of all, I would say it's a really unique experience just because it has such a community atmosphere, and you're exposed to so many different disciplines that you wouldn't normally meet. So for example, in my Fulbright year, there was plenty of different people from history and the arts and different types of sciences. So typically at work events, you'd really meet people from your own discipline. And so I thought this is really interesting, meeting such a variety of different people. And then with that, I think the Fulbright opens up a lot of opportunities that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I think this really comes from the reputation that it has, and it's so well known, and you almost go to your host institution as an ambassador. So it just basically opens up opportunities, and you meet so many people that I don't think you would otherwise. So for example, myself and someone else that were both in Austin at the same time, through the Fulbright, we were put in contact with the Irish consulate in Austin, and we ended up going to a lot of different events through the consulate. So I definitely wouldn't have been doing that without the Fulbright. I think also a key aspect of the Fulbright for me is that there's such a big emphasis on all of the things that you do outside of work. So it's almost just as, if not more important, and they really encourage you to do everything you can do while you're there and really immerse yourself in the experience. So there's a big emphasis on social activities and traveling while you're there and really just enjoying it to the full extent. So it's very personal experience as well as developing your work skills. So with that, I'd say there's also a lot of support from the Commission. So both here before you go and preparing you to go, while you're over there, they offer you a lot of support. And then when you come back, they still want to hear from you, which I think is quite refreshing. So in terms of the application, I think I would just kind of have a few tips. I think Emma kind of touched on these already. First of all, I would say to kind of think about why you're applying for a Fulbright. So there's plenty of different funding agencies out there and different grants available for travel, but this is quite a different program. So I think it's really key to understand that in your application. And kind of with that, how do you fit with the ethos? So I suppose you could say by that, you know, do you have this appreciation for collaboration and value what this could bring to you? So for me, I went for a 6-month kind of specific project. And I think that's a really key element as well, to pick a research group and a project that means you can learn from them, that maybe they do something that you don't do, but also perhaps that you can bring something to them. So in that way, your project is collaborative and it's mutually beneficial. And I think also kind of establishing new relationships is really a key aspect of it. So we had no link with UT Austin, and definitely my research group had no links with the research group that I went to. So that was kind of something I definitely wanted to do over there, to kind of establish a new relationship and continue that when I came back, which is something that I've done. So overall, I would say it's a really brilliant experience, and I would recommend it to anybody, encourage anyone thinking of doing it, that you definitely become part of this new community and meet loads of new people. And it's definitely the highlight of my PhD so far. So I don't know if wait till the end for questions or.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. Yeah, we'll take questions at the end, but if anyone does have any questions, they can type them in the chat box now and I'll take a note of them. Thanks so much for that, Alex. Really interested to hear about your experience, what the work you were doing, but also the social aspect and the long kind of lasting effects of the award too. Thank you very much. Okay, so next we're going to hear from Professor Colin Bradley. And I think, Colin, you have a few slides as well, don't you?
Indeed. So, yeah, I hope you can all see my slide there. So Colin Bradley is my name, and as Emma's already said, I'm Professor of General Practice in UCC in Cork. And I went to University of Oklahoma on HRV, Health Impact Fulbright Scholarship. So if people are interested in the HRV thing, I can hopefully take some questions on that. So yeah, but me. So basically, as well as being an academic, I've been a GP. I've worked in Manchester and Birmingham in the UK, though I've been in general practice, academic general practice, of which 23 have been in Cork. And my doctoral work was on the concept of uncomfortable prescribing, which is really where GPs issue prescriptions to patients about which they're uncomfortable. And that overlaps with quite a lot of areas of prescribing. So I've done projects on antimicrobial prescribing, benzodiazepine prescribing, and on multiple prescribing of polypharmacy. And I came to the Fulbright, again, just put up a picture of a few people who say were key to my decisions, if you like. The first is Lizelle Benfield, who actually was a Fulbright scholar visiting UCC in 2015. And she certainly was very strongly encouraging me to take up the option. And she encouraged me also that it's something that is suitable for people who are, if you like, fairly well on in their career, like I was, and indeed she was when she took hers. Then looking for the topic, as I say, I was interested in the whole area of prescribing, and it so happened that again around that time, shortly after that, this guy, Vice Admiral Murphy, who was the Surgeon General of the United States, highlighted what has now become known as the opioid crisis, the opioid epidemic. So that's obviously a problem area of prescribing. I happened to already know of, although didn't know well, this guy Jim Mould, who was then a research professor at the OU, or the University of Oklahoma. As it happened, he'd retired by the time I applied, so I then ended up dealing with the successor, who was this guy Zoltan Caldi. And then I ended up here, as I say, in the Family Medicine Center in the University of Oklahoma. University of Oklahoma, the main campus is actually in a town called Norman, about 20 miles south of Oklahoma City. But the health services, the health sciences center city. And again, I say to come up with a study that, again, as Alex was saying, some mutual benefit. So I was able to bring some of my experience of this discussion of prescribing to their particular problem of opioid prescribing. And we came up with what we called the ROPE study, reducing opioid prescribing through education and support. And it was something mutually agreed between myself and colleagues in Oklahoma. Just again, as I say, I mentioned this already, but it's quite a number of things you need to do before you go. So it is quite like there are multiple facets to the whole process. One of which I just put up here, Seamus Heaney, because that reminds me that I had prepared a personal statement, and I cited quoted Heaney in that, which I think was kind of useful. I then had to get, as I say, a confirmation of my commitments from colleagues in Oklahoma. And again, the picture on the right here just reminds me of the fact that there was a lot of events that we went to before going to Oklahoma in Ireland around Fulbright. And again, time doesn't permit me to tell you all the joys of Oklahoma City, but it was an interesting place, right? And there's a lot of pleasant surprises for us. There's quite a lot to see around Oklahoma, and indeed in the wider Oklahoma state. So again, just say there's lots of interesting places all over America. I think Irish people tend to focus maybe rather on the east and west coast. There's a lot to be seen in the middle. The other thing that I went on as well, which I'm really glad I did, was something that was offered to us by the Fulbright people when we were in the States, which was this enrichment seminar. In our particular case, we were brought to Huntsville, Alabama, which is where the Saturn rocket was developed. And then we also went from there to visit Birmingham, Alabama, which again was a very interesting place. But again, as Alex mentioned, that was really an opportunity to meet other Fulbrighters who were in the States from all over the world and all sorts of disciplines. So it was an incredibly diverse group of people, and it was a really excellent opportunity. So again, if you do succeed in the Fulbright and you're offered this opportunity to go to the enrichment seminar, grab it with both hands. It was great. So again, talking about what's happened then since, well, so one of the things that when I was there as well, again, I suppose like Alex, I ended up doing quite a lot of presentations about my work in Ireland and the work I was doing in the US. to all sorts of bodies, including doing something called grand rounds in their major teaching centre. Also presented to the medical board, which is their equivalent to the medical council. Presented to a group of Harvard alumni when I was there. So as I say, there were lots of opportunities to talk to people about what I was doing. And as I say, the other thing, this particular talk that I gave, it was interesting. They were very interested in talking about not just the research topic, but learning about healthcare in Europe and Ireland, and again, learning from them about healthcare in the US. So there's, again, even though one had one specific topic, one specific research, one gets to talk to people about a lot more things than that. And then just in terms of what flows from it, well, in my particular case, as I say, we were trying to produce some education and support for doctors dealing with opioid addicted patients. And from that, as I say, we have since published, and indeed, this is a presentation I gave to the North American Primary Care Research Group in November 2018 after coming back from Oklahoma. And in fact, quite recently, I've been back in contact with my colleagues in Oklahoma who continued to develop the education and support for family medicine doctors, as they call them, or primary care doctors. So again, it's, as I say, it continues to bring mutual benefits. And as pure coincidence, I've also been in touch with Professor Benfield just today, again, about continuous work we were doing on nursing aspects, which is her area of expertise. So the tips really that I'd give to you, again, overlap maybe with what Alex and Emma have been saying. I think one of the important things is that this is not just a typical academic application that you put in for a grant or indeed for an academic post. It has some quite different aspects to it. So one of the key things is to reflect quite a bit on who you are, and not just what you are, not what kind of academic you are, but what kind of a person you are. You need to think carefully about what you hope to get from Fulbright, and again, being aware that Fulbright, as I say, has a whole ethos that goes with it. Irishness is an important part of what you offer, but of course it's not the only thing. And again, it's useful to talk to Fulbright ambassadors and Fulbright alumni to get a sense of the Fulbright family, as it were, so that is reflected in your application. One of the things that I think academics struggle with more so than the research aspect of it is actually the personal statement. And again, my tip there is to try and make it truly personal and not just rewording for CV. Start your preparation early. When it comes to writing the proposal and the personal statement and all the things that you submit, write, rewrite, get them reviewed by critical friends and maybe Fulbright alumni if you know any. And again, Emma's touched on this, that there's a push for some geographic diversity. And I know from medical colleagues who tend to focus on Boston and New York, and I would just tell them it's not the only place in America where Irish are welcome. So keep your geographic search pretty broad. And again, it's really about going for it, grabbing with both hands, not just to get the Fulbright award, but when you are successful, to make the most of it.
Thank you so much, Colin. Yeah, I would actually, thanks for mentioning that as well, Colin. Colin is our Fulbright ambassador at UCC. We do have 22 Fulbright ambassadors around the country. We also have Roshin Hyde is our Fulbright ambassador at Queen's, and Trina, who's about to speak next, is our ambassador at IT Carlow. So they're on campus for when we're all back on campus, but also just if you're from the universities with an ambassador, it's worth reaching out to them because they can just kind of give you some tips on the process. Okay, so Trina, you're up next. So I think I'm going to share your presentation for you, but if you just want to say hello there.
I'm actually going to maybe stop the video as well because I'm out in the sticks and the signal isn't great here. I want to make sure you can hear me, but just to start by saying I received the Tech Impact Award in 2018, and I'll just stop this, I think. And my whole Fulbright experience was positive from start to finish. The first slide here is the day I arrived. I had interviews scheduled in Columbia University, and from there I was introduced to people that would really impact on my research in a very profound way. My research was looking at the social media and how they influence editorial decisions. So my background is a little bit different, I think, to most people, in the sense that even though I was in academia at the time of my application, my background was more in the industry. I'd worked in RTE and in CNN, in lifestyle and also in political correspondence. So I felt that perhaps I wasn't a good fit for the application. You might be thinking like this too, you know, but and as well because I didn't have a PhD. But one thing I can say, and something that really stood to me for my application and also for the interview process, if you want to move on to the next slide there, Emma, was to talk to people who have been on the Fulbright. So I knew specifically I wanted to go for the Fulbright Tech Impact. So I looked up everybody who had been on it, and I contacted every one of them, and I spoke to them about the experience and learned about them. And every single person that I contacted, they were incredibly open and giving, and it was the first time that I really got a glimpse into what a supportive community Fulbright is. And talking to them gave me the confidence to go for it, because I could see we did have a lot of common ground. If you want to move on to the next slide, Emma. So when I got to the interview process, there wasn't any focus on my research topic, and I think that can be something that throws a lot of people. You have to realize at this stage you've sent in an incredibly detailed and thorough application process which has been vetted, so they know all about your research. You've ticked that box. And really what I felt at the interview process, what they were trying to find out more was, who am I as a person? How would I represent Fulbright? How would I represent my country? So if I could give you one tip, apart from talking to people, if you want to move on to the next slide, it's talking to people. What was the other thing I was going to say? It's being authentic at the interview. And when they ask you, you know, maybe what can you bring culturally, rather than just giving, you know, a black and white answer, to tell a story. And I've always found that's kind of one of the most powerful ways to show people who you really are. So the university I went to was New York University. You can keep going through the slides there, Emma. And even though I was based there, I still went to other universities like Columbia, and it wasn't fixed, my research and who I would spend time with. The big difference, I think, between doing research from a desktop in Ireland and going on a Tech Impact, Fulbright Tech Impact, is the contacts you make and the people you're introduced to and the ideas and the conversations you have that would never ever be possible from a desktop at home. Can keep moving on there, Emma, thanks. So I have a picture here with my family, because one of the reasons why I was kind of hesitant to apply for the Fulbright was because I'd worked out if I got it, I'd have a newborn baby in tow, and two young kids under the age of 7. And I worried, how could I possibly manage all of this? You can keep going through the slides. Where would I live? What would I do with them when I was working? So I was lucky in the sense that my husband can work from home, so we split the day between us. And the impact on my family of bringing them with me was something that will last, I think, a lifetime for them. Even now, two years on, they still reference it. And so, as somebody, I think Alix also mentioned, Fulbright is not just about the research. That is a huge part of it, but it's also about what you bring and what you get from it. So if I was to leave you with anything, it's, if you're hesitating about applying because it's not the right time, whether you have tiny kids or you don't have a PhD or you think you're not a good fit, apply. You won't regret it. And if you put that work into the application and be really thorough in it, you'll certainly have a very good chance, as I did.
Super, thank you so much, Trina. Yeah, and it's really important to point out that many people do bring their families with them on the Fulbright, and it is possible. And there's Trina and a number of other alum who are kind of around to chat about it. If you're happy to, Trina, you know, if you want any advice on that. Some people will go short term, and some people will be going for the full academic year, and need to make all those arrangements. So there are people who have gone through it before that you can chat to. So next we'll hear from Cian. Cian, if you want to take the reins there.
Sure. Hi everyone. So I don't have any slides, so I'll try to keep it a bit more short and brief maybe. So I am a pharmacist originally. I did pharmacy in UCC, and I moved to Dublin thereafter and completed a PhD in regenerative medicine in RCSI, the Royal College of Surgeons. So sort of a similar discipline to Alix. I actually then also was on the same Fulbright cycle as Alix, but in a different location. So I was an Fulbright INUI scholar in 2018, and I spent time in San Diego. So why did I decide to do it? I suppose, well, during my PhD, I actually unusually was able to get a lecture position before the end of my PhD. So that was partly to do with being a pharmacist as well, that it was a school of pharmacy. So it was a great opportunity, but originally I was kind of thinking there'd be the normal postdoc route that would happen after a PhD, and I had my sights set in the States. From a research perspective, it's kind of where the gold standard of the kind of research I do is in, but also I spent time there in a J1, which was a different experience, I suppose, from the academic idea. But I really enjoyed my time there during college when I spent the summer in San Francisco. And I hadn't been in America much apart from that, so I wanted to go back and get that kind of taste as well. So the thing for me was that the Fulbright, by being the scholarship approach as opposed to the student approach, was really fantastic opportunity for me to be able to take a form of sabbatical and still try get that same experience in my current position. So I went to San Diego, as I said. The reason that happened wasn't just because I like surfing a lot and San Diego is really nice at that time of the year. It was actually a lot down due to the person. So I was very interested in working with a particular researcher, a particular professor. His name is Adam Engler, and part of my decision was born out of the type of research he did, and I was hoping to upskill while also getting the experience of the Fulbright. And it just so happened fortuitously that he was in San Diego, which was a nice spot. But that in itself still was kind of different for us in RCSI, because there's actually a lot of Fulbright alumni in RCSI, and a lot of the alumni have generally tended to, there's very strong collaborative links with Boston in general. So that was kind of the path a lot of people had walked, and they got really great advice from a lot of people in it. But then part of me also kind of wanted to try go somewhere else. So those two features, mainly the link, the academic link, and the kind of the opportunity to forge that new connection, and perhaps going somewhere else different from the East Coast, were kind of the two main drivers for me. It was a great experience. It was quite short for me, unfortunately. I would have loved to have been longer, and that's going to be my main piece of advice for you at the end. So I was there for a 3-month period. So I was there for sort of the end of the summer, start of the fall. I think I'd just be reiterating what a lot of the others have said in terms of the personal experience getting out. San Diego was really cool to see the academic culture, but also actually the whole like social culture as well was great. And there were sort of interesting, unusual kind of events that you hear about a lot when I was on there, such as I got to sort of see outside Comic-Con in action, and kind of that cultural element was interesting. But also then as well, you're in a good spot in San Diego to travel and see other areas outside. In terms of, I suppose, so a lot of the kind of the personal elements have been outlined a lot by the others, so I might kind of focus a little bit more on some of the maybe a bit more boring but also important aspects of the Fulbright. So in terms of the benefits of when it came back, particularly for me, so the Fulbright INUI scholarship is for people who recently obtained their PhD. So for me, it was a great stepping stone to start kind of forging my own path, start developing my own lab and position a bit, which is an important consideration for kind of a career perspective. It was a beautiful bonus that Adam was a really nice guy. He's really sound. His lab was great, so I've made friends in his lab who have since gone on to their own positions. So indirectly, even though it wasn't the objective, that in itself actually widens your network across. it was also a great eye opener from a funding perspective to have a collaborative link in the US, both for types of grants you can apply for, and that's one of the main outcomes for me. I've been applying for grants with Adam. Kind of there's other transatlantic cooperative initiatives you can apply for, but also when you think about how competitive the sort of funding environment is in Ireland, it can give you new opportunities there. Yeah, overall it was really that collaborative link for me, which I was delighted with to come back. And I was originally going to be going over for a conference this year to see them again, but you know, I think everyone knows what happened there while we're all here talking video form. So tips actually for the application, just finishing that. So the last thing, I mean, I think a lot's been said already. Alix and Colin have focused very nicely on the idea of understanding the ethos and the personal aspect. Trina as well was talking about that, a lot of what the interview is about, and the personal statement is a challenge. The one tip for me in the application, I would say, is that I suppose for me, a lot of people I spoke to were people who ended up going on student applications as opposed to scholars, and the dynamic was different in the written application, that the project application as a scholar is actually, it's a proper grant application. I'm not at all taking away from the student one, but there's a different perspective and a different focus is what I'm trying to say. So the personal statement is really where it matters, but also I would advise you to have actually a proper thought out project in as so far as possible. It really will just make the application process a bit more streamlined, a bit more easy for you. What's key for that, I think, is like good engagement with whoever your collaborator is, and just it's good to kind of work out what they're hoping for a bit. I mean, most of the time they have everything to gain and nothing to lose by forming this partnership. I think from my experience, Adam was a guy who was really interested, and we were able to develop a project for each other, and I was actually able to get him over to Ireland to visit a conference beforehand, which was great because we actually got to like brainstorm a bit in advance of that. But even if you can't do that in the days of Zoom, I think you could work out an application. For other collaborators, they might just sort of be happy to just write to your letter and say, write whatever you want. In your project, I mean, you know, obviously it's better if you build something collaboratively, but figure out what works best in your dynamic for your sport. And lastly, I'd just say, if you are like me and you are kind of going on a sort of a sabbatical, push your boss to try go for as long as possible is what I would say. So I kind of had to be back for teaching responsibilities in October. That's why I was sort of cut a bit short. I still really felt like I got a great experience. I got to do a lot, made sure I squeezed in lots of travel around the place and things like that. But the one thing for me is, if you know, compared to people who are there for the full time, I'm very envious of them in terms of getting they had more opportunities to broaden that even more. So I would say that really, even if it's convincing your boss from a work perspective, you'll form better links and potentially get better outputs with more of a time. But more importantly, I think for you and the experience involved, try go for the full length of time, whether it's the 12 months on the scholarship or even longer in the student one. Yeah, so that's really it. That's kind of the flavor of my experience anyway. Hopefully it's helpful.
Thanks so much, Cian. Yeah, that's a really good tip, you know, to discuss with your department head or your employer, you know, and discuss kind of the benefits, as, you know, Alix was saying, and Colin and Cian, and Trina as well, you know, that those ongoing connections between your home institution, your host institution, or your place of work at home and wherever you're going in the US can be really beneficial to your whole organization as well as yourselves. So now our last speaker is Roshin. Roshin, if you want to take over there. See, Roshin, sorry, you're still muted there actually, if you just, yeah.
Okay.
Can hear you now, and I can see that you're screen sharing, but we can't see your presentation yet.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, there it is.
Yeah, okay, great. So my name is Roshin Hyde. I'm a doctoral researcher in QUB, and my background is architecture. I practiced for 15 years before going back to college to do the PhD, and the area of my research is low carbon, high performance concrete cladding panels. And I'm working with a lot of innovative technologies, including laser scanning, point cloud modeling, 3D printing. And I went to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte for my Fulbright So yeah, as I mentioned, my research is about developing new materials which are kind of stronger and better than existing materials, but with lower carbon footprints. And specifically a material called geopolymer concrete, which is a high performance cement-free concrete. The processes that I'm using are laser scanning, then point cloud modeling, then 3D printing, mold liners, and casting textured concrete panels on reconfigurable surfaces. I had lots of fun. So the university that I went to, University of North Carolina, in 2015, as part of the Solar Decathlon, they constructed the world's first low carbon, high performance geopolymer concrete sandwich panel as part of this project. So they were kind of, it was quite a massive panel. It was about kind of 300-400 mil thick, and my panel was super thin. So there was kind of a natural convergence between the two projects, because my work was like kind of the next stage of what they would be doing if they were continuing with the project. Sorry, the cat has appeared here. Children and cats, it wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without an animal or a child. Hang on, I'll throw him out. Sorry about that. So yeah, just a bit about Charlotte. So Charlotte is coming top of a lot of polls of places to live in the US. It's adjacent to the kind of famous research triangle, which is Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill and Duke University. It was a wonderful place to go. It's kind of, you know, I think as Colin was saying earlier, it's good to consider places outside of maybe, you know, New York, Boston, San Francisco or LA. So I'm absolutely delighted that that's where we ended up. So for the time I was there, I got to work with lots of people within the university. I worked across, I think, 4 or 5 departments. So architecture, engineering, mechanical engineering, computing, geology. So I got to meet a lot of people within the university. Also outside the university, I visited a lot of quarries, steel mills, recycling facilities, construction sites. So it was great to see kind of, you know, how industries were, you know, what was the same and what was different. In terms of the social aspect of things, my son came with me. He went to elementary school there. He had an amazing 6 months as well. We got to travel a lot. I did a lot of workshops with the kids in his school, you know, taught them about 3D printing and my research. And kind of post the Fulbright, I had the experience of doing the Fulbright TEDx with Emma, which was wonderful, and it's definitely one of the best things I've ever done. It's a great kind of 8-minute intro to my research for people that I'm hoping to collaborate with. I also ended up doing stand-up comedy about my research, which something I never thought would happen. Concrete stand-up comedy, so that was interesting too. And I've got to forge some kind of relationships with companies that I'm hoping to work with in the future. I went back again last November, so I came back in July, and then I had a few kind of follow-up visits. I got more funding through my university and was able to go back and meet up with some of the companies that I'd met with while I was there, and we're kind of discussing future collaborations. In terms of the tips that I would give for other people, you know, considering applying, number 1 would be contact people like myself and other Fulbright alumni for advice and support. I would say contact your referees as early as possible, because that aspect of the process is quite involved, and you don't want to be saying to them like a week before you submit your application, you know, would you mind writing me up a reference, because it's actually an online process, and, you know, it's quite a detailed and important part of the application. So I would consider who you're going to ask and make sure you ask them early. The actual process itself, the form, I would give yourself 2 weeks, just not to be kind of rushing, to have time to kind of, you know, write up drafts and have people look over them for you. Regarding the host institution, I mean, even if you're really sure of the place you want to go, I would consider a range, because initially I had thought about going to another university, but then I kind of read these tips and it suggested looking at 3 quite different institutions and looking at what you could do in each. And then I ended up going with kind of, you know, not my first choice, and it was, you know, a much richer experience for that. So I wouldn't narrow your first choice. I would consider, you know, 3 quite different setups and then look into each of them. In terms of making contact with the host institutions, I would do that as early as possible, because it can be tricky, because a lot of these people are just inundated with, you know, emails and kind of, you know, communications through social media, and they may not get back to you straight away. So, and maybe use a contact, you know, do a kind of an introduction through someone else, or try something like LinkedIn. As well as considering, you know, what you're going to get out of your time in the host institution, you should consider what you're going to bring to them. So my collaboration was kind of learning about how they had done a full-scale project, but also, you know, I was able to input kind of, you know, how I was able to reduce the kind of footprint of this building, and you know, go with kind of more high performance materials. So they had the opportunity, we were both learning from the experience. Another tip, I suppose more technical, would be to add kind of a month or two to your program for a local training and induction. It's quite involved. So, you know, before you're allowed to set foot in a laboratory, you're going to have to do a lot of health and safety training and policy training. And, you know, I was using a lot of very advanced equipment. So there was all sorts of, you know, health and safety things I had to do before. So just give yourself time for that. Or even if you do get the place, try and do it maybe before you go out there, because most of it is online. And as Alix and Colin and Trina and Cian have said, you know, consider both the academic and the cultural opportunities. This program, both are equally important. So it's not just purely about the research. And finally, I would say, you know, be strategic about why, you know, what you're doing and why you're doing it, and, you know, look to get the most from the program, because there are some amazing opportunities. You know, you're going to end up in the States, and you're going to have access to an awful lot of people, and, you know, networks that maybe you wouldn't be able to access normally. And, you know, so really kind of think through, you know, what you can get from this experience, and, you know, make sure you kind of maximize the opportunity that the program offers. And I've just put up a couple of tips here of kind of websites and things that I looked at before I did my application. So there's a lot of things. There's a great forum on Reddit. There's a lot of different, you know, where people are giving tips about it, and then they're kind of sharing, you know, all through the stage. Everyone's asking how you get on with this when the interviews are coming up. So there's a nice kind of camaraderie, you know, as part of the application process. And finally, just good luck. And hopefully there's some future Fulbrighters out there. Okay,
thank you so much, Róisín. It's great to hear about your experience in general. It sounds great. And also about those forums. It's nice to have some support. And we do have a Fulbrighter app, and there's quite a few different places that you can seek support in your application. Then, of course, when you're over in the States as well. So now I think we'll have a few minutes to take questions. We do have one that just came in. One of our participants is asking, did you find any difficulties in contacting researchers in the US to start a collaborative link in the Fulbright for your Fulbright work? So is there anyone who like encountered any challenges and had to overcome them, or any tips on that?
Colin here. Yeah, again, as I think, I was fortunate that there was someone from the institution I went to that was in my institution at the time, and so again, I'd say back what Róisín was saying, that it's good to have a contact within the institution already. And even in spite of that, though, I have to say that the particular department I went for, the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health, wasn't really familiar with the Fulbright process till I approached them. And it took them a little bit of a while to get their head around what I was kind of going to do, and what I would be needing from them, and what they would be getting from me. So I do think there's, it wasn't difficult in the end, but there was a process to be gone through, and it took a little while. So I think that's something to be aware of. And again, backing up Róisín's point, one of the things that, again, I became aware of was the need to do certain online training and to get ethical approval for it. And again, even though I did start that process before I went, some obstacles were still there when I got to the US, so it took another month or so to overcome the final hurdles to actually get going for research. So as I say, I think it's all about recognizing that all these processes can take quite a bit of time, and there may be some delays and obstacles along the way, so you need to be aware of those and alert, looking out for them, and try and tackle things as early as you can.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, and you did mention in your presentation as well that you were in touch with Lizelle Benefield, who's one of the US scholars who came to Ireland. So, you know, it's worth looking through the website for, you can see our alum from the last 10 years, US and Irish. So, you know, some of those US alum might be based in US institutions, and they're very happy. They're all as friendly as our speakers today, and happy to answer any questions. So do feel free to reach out to us and get their email.
Absolutely. Again, I would say, and I think that someone else said, I think maybe Alix, that basically the Fulbright alumni that I contacted in Ireland were all very helpful. Some of whom I knew a little bit in advance, some I didn't know from Adam, but they're all equally helpful and encouraging.
Great, thank you.
I was also just going to suggest, I mean, I was kind of cold calling, you know, all of the people that I was contacting. I didn't have any network or existing relationships, and it was quite challenging, but I found actually phone calling rather than emails or, you know, tweets or, you know, all these more advanced kind of social media platforms, like if you just picked up the phone and called and, you know, kind of got a message to the person, because as I said, I think people are overwhelmed with a lot of, you know, kind of emails from people they don't know or messages. So, you know, that really works, just phoning up and asking somebody who worked with them, you know, how I could kind of track them down and when was a good time to call. And, you know, so it doesn't seem like the most obvious, but it ended up being more successful than for me.
Thanks, Roshin.
To add something there, as well, just from a general perspective of the feedback we get from a lot of applicants, is that just to understand that in the US, it is fairly well-known program, and a lot of the applicants or the people that you might contact have either done it or would consider applying for Fulbright themselves. So from their point of view, if you're talking to them, and particularly where they know about the Fulbright program, they're already thinking that you're very good because you're actually considering applying for a Fulbright. So there's a lot of positives, and for a lot of people there is a very much an open door in creating those contacts. I would actually wholly agree with Róisín as well, say that I think it's very useful to pick up the phone. It's not quite a cold call, you know, maybe occasionally will be, but I think it's a very proactive way to progress things forward.
Great. We have a few more minutes. If people do have questions, you can type them in the chat box there. I suppose, are there any other tips? You covered quite a lot in all of your presentations. It's great to hear. In terms, Trina, I suppose you brought your family as well. Did that involve a lot of planning for you in the end, do you think?
You know, it was fine. The hardest part was just making sure that we had all the vaccines that were necessary and that I could prove that we had them. With the kids, it was easier, but with ourselves, it was harder. And that was a hurdle that I didn't expect, but you know, that was it. Finding accommodation, I was worried and stressed about again. It was fine. We lived in Brooklyn. The public transport is so amazing. It was very easy to get around. So no, all the things in my head that I thought could go wrong didn't go wrong. And you know, it was all very smooth and easy.
That's good to hear. And Róisín, you brought your son as well. Did you have a similar experience?
Yes, a lot of vaccinations, a lot of tears, a lot before we went and a lot after we arrived as well. So, but no, it was kind of like, you know, I mean, he used to tell people he was on a Fulbright too in school, because it was, you know, I mean, he had an incredible time there. You know, it's so much more diverse, and, you know, just, I mean, the experience was amazing for him. You know, he made really good friends. You know, they were all kind of back in the house a couple of days after he started up. I got to meet a lot of the parents through the school. I suppose it meant that we were much more engaged with the community than maybe had I been, you know, a single person on a purely academic, you know, kind of experience, because, you know, obviously I was taking part in all the school activities as well. And no, it was absolutely wonderful. And it was really interesting for him to see the difference between, you know, the way, you know, the education system is there and in Ireland. And so no, it wasn't any more difficult. It just made the whole experience richer, I think, for it, you know, and gave me more opportunities to kind of interact with the local community through his school and through the social network that we met from that.
I might just comment. My wife came with me as well, and something we didn't really fully understand was where I was there technically on a J1, she was on a J2, and on a J2 you are allowed to work, but you have to get a work permit. So there was, and in order to get a work permit, I had to get a social security number. So there are a lot of steps there that we didn't really anticipate. And then in the end, having sort of applied for a work permit, she then discovered she couldn't actually do the work she does do because she's a professional social worker. So there are a whole lot of professional obstacles as well. So that was something we sort of, I mean, we were neutral about it anyway. She didn't have to work, but she would like to have been able to work. And I suppose she had a more shall we say, a less interesting time than me in a sense, because I was going off to work each day, and she was, as she said herself, she mostly spent her time meeting Uber drivers and hairdressers. But you know, as I say, there are some things that you might anticipate. The other thing, just in contrast to what Trina was saying as well, in Oklahoma, I have to say the public transport is not great. Car hire is relatively inexpensive compared to here, but again, there was a whole issue around insurance, which we got around by taking out an American credit card, which then included car insurance with it. So it's just, there are a few things like that I must confess we hadn't anticipated, and there were, you know, challenges, but we overcame them. But as I say, there were a couple of things we hadn't really thought of in advance, because we hadn't, as I say, picked up on those aspects of things that are different from here, or even different from other parts of the States that I've been to before.
And that's, again, another reason to reach out to alum, you know, as many as you can, really, because you might find that they've all, you know, encountered experiences that you might be looking into as well. So you don't have to start from scratch, hopefully. Okay, so just before we finish up, there's no more questions coming at the moment, but I will give you that email address again now in a minute. But I think our director, Dara Fitzgerald, just wanted to say a few words before I finish up. So Dara, if you want to.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks all our panelists, and thanks everybody who joined in on the call. It's been very interesting. I have to say, I should preface my next comments by saying that my background, a PhD in computer science and biotech, so I kind of feel at home in a lot of this space, I have to say. And I know a lot of the people on this call are kind of in innovative spaces. I would also say they'll be innovative when you're considering the awards you're applying to. A lot of the sponsored awards and the Tech Impact Awards as well have a lot of scope for people who consider what they want to do. So if you look at EPA or GSI, they cover so many areas, you know, that there's a reasonable chance that a lot of people will actually be covered over in that. And the other comment I wanted to say as well is that we're very encouraging our professionals as well, and there are lots of reasons for that. Fulbright does support professionals. It's not always as obvious, and we try to make things like the Tech Impact in particular kind of more suitable to professionals, but all of the awards would, the majority of awards would be open to professionals. Any UI scholar may or may not be as well. It depends on what your previous background was. But one of the reasons we do encourage professionals, and we do encourage people to engage with colleagues in the US, is that it's something we actually do very well from early stage research or even late stage research. You know, I've had a personal experience where you can, you know, you develop technology, you patent technology, you generate a company, and then you produce, you know, a product, and then you arrive in the States and you have nothing. You know, I think a better principle would have been to have started much earlier research projects with colleagues in the States, in the same way that I worked with a company and we had 7 European projects, so we had great colleagues in universities and companies all around Europe. So that's part of my kind of view from having worn the t-shirt to say that I think it's a great opportunity to go to take this and kind of see where it goes. It's a great professional and it's a great personal development opportunity as well. I've heard many times before, and I can't remember, it might have been Trina said it, that there are very few downsides to applying for a Fulbright grant. It's probably your time, and to be honest with you, it's time well spent, because a lot of the things you have to do, I've applied for many awards or grants myself over the years. It's very focused on the technology or the outcome from it or the papers that you want to do. This Fulbright application is so much more about yourself, and by even doing that, it forces you to think about what you want to do and where you want to go with it. So at all stages, at a postgraduate, at postdoctoral stage, professional stage, it's an absolutely worthwhile thing to do. I have to say, all of the tips that you were given were very, very useful, you know, and I would trawl through them again. I think Colin's page in particular, he probably took some of the thunder for the comments that I would have made. It was a really nice synopsis of all the kind of the general higher level points that I would typically look at as well. So I would say, please look at through all of the slides and get a chance to kind of rewind this as well and focus on the points that they've made, because there were no points made that didn't have some value in with an application for Fulbright. I think actually in your further development, your career development and even personal development, and bringing your children away and that exposure. And even, you know, having had experience myself where the kids kind of grow up and start forgetting, there's so many pictures that they then reconnect with over their time there. So all of that has real positive value for you and your family, should you be bringing them. The last thing I would say is that, you know, you probably were right about your technology, you know, and again, I've been that soldier, you know, I've written up the tech and world beating, and it's going to, you know, cure cancer and all of those types of great stories that we all live with. And we become technologists and we become the technology. But actually you are the technologist and you're a person, and bring it back to that as well. That's the real difference. You know, so I'm being very specific in saying that because I could be talking to myself, you know, 5-6 years ago, and telling myself to consider where I wanted to go and not just about the technology. So please do that. And again, that really comes into play if you get to an interview stage, that we will be very much talking to you about you. So don't be surprised. Okay. Again, I don't really have much else to add. I think it was comprehensively covered. Thanks very much to Emma for sorting this out, and for Sarah for acting as backup that wasn't needed. And to all of our great Fulbrighters, thank you again for your time spending there. I'll pass it back to you then.
Thanks, Dara. Yeah, I'd like to echo sincere thanks to all our panelists today. Alix, Colin, Trina, Cian and Róisín, you were great. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And I'd also like to thank our attendees, all of you, for giving up your lunchtime to listen. Just a reminder that there are a number of sessions, webinar sessions coming up as part of our series, and attendees can sign up to hear more from alum and find out about how they chose their institutions and their tips on applying, etc. So check out the rest of the series on fulbright.ie. Particularly encourage you to register for that application process webinar. That's at 1 p.m. on the 17th of September. And also I'd recommend that you register on our website, register your interest, so you're added to our mailing list, and then you'll receive the instructions, the guidelines for application, and that online application link as soon as the awards open on the 31st, okay? And if there are any questions that you didn't get a chance to answer today, you can email awards@fulbright.ie at any stage, okay? So thanks again to our speakers and to our participants. I hope you all have a great day. Thanks.